Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
How are you this morning, Dr. Paul?
Doing well.
Good.
You know, the Republicans are really up today. You know, it's almost like they won next year or the end of the year in the election and everything. Because I was just on Stuart Varney's show, and he was sort of happy, and the Republicans at the station were very happy. And it is a major disaster, I would think, that whole primary caucus, the way the Democrats ran it. And maybe it's just a reflection of the ineptness of interventionists and do-gooders and planners, because it didn't go well. But it did bring back memories a little bit, and you may remember a little bit too. You know,
yeah.
I had run for president a couple times. And I didn't win, fortunately. But especially in 12, I remember, because we had built up pretty good support, and we were doing very well in Iowa. And the truth is I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to these numbers, because I thought, holy man, I've done as well as any one of those Democrats have done this one. But anyway, on the night of the caucus, they measured things differently. As they walked in, there was a straw vote. And that could be accomplished in an hour or so. You know, all these caucuses meet, but everybody made their initial commitment, and they had a straw vote, and then it was reported, and it was usually out in a couple hours. Mm-hmm. Well, they changed the rules, and they had to go through the caucus process. And I'm sure you were aware that how many steps they have to go, and eliminations and revote and all this, and paper ballots, and very, very confusing. So that's a big difference. But I remember that night well, because they said, well, it looks like they're going to give you third place, in it, because Romney won and Santorum was second. But Santorum was close. Close to first place, close to beating Romney. But maybe the organizers were in favor of Romney, because there was a bit of a contest. Santorum said, no, I did a lot better than this. I want a recount. So after the big news was out and Romney got the big push, the next day they came up with a new number, and they say, really Santorum won by a dozen votes, real close. But then he got to use that. And but the end of the story is that we followed through. The straw vote was important, but we did everything we were supposed to do. We had a good organization, and all the way up to the convention. And we essentially had all the delegates except for a few that we had to give away. Yeah. But so we really won Iowa, but I don't think there's a person in the country who would say, oh, what are you guys talking about? So it's happened before. I think this one is messier and has more significance. I think it reflects the fact that the Democrats they don't have a message. They have a lot of negativity, and they can't combat with Trump. Trump is there trying to kill the messenger, his message is too powerful. So that they came up, and I think all interventionists end up this way. But it's especially bad now. I think there are a lot of problems. The Democrats are just floundering around, and they don't have a message, and it turned out to be a fiasco. And of course, nobody believes that it was just a paper mistake, because 4 people got to declare victory, So I think that people will get tired of this, but still, it's important. It's a big event, and we'll learn more in a few weeks when they have the primary up in New Hampshire.
Yeah. Well, you don't share very much with Bernie Sanders, despite what some people may think, but he has and has had, and you had and have very passionate backers and supporters. And you're also outliers within your own party. So I think what you do have in common is it looks like you've both been ripped off a couple of times right. in our so-called voting system. But the funniest thing about this, and over and over again we say we're not Trump fans, and I find myself nauseous when he talks about, aren't you sick of winning yet? But you just can't help but think, how could he have created something? And I'm sure most of our viewers have seen his tweet, but it's just, this falls into his lap. Here's Trump on the Iowa fiasco. The Democrat caucus is an unmitigated disaster. Nothing works, just like they ran the country. Remember the $5 billion Obamacare website that should have cost 2% of that? The only person that can claim a very big victory in Iowa last night is Trump.
Yeah, right. I just thought of something as you were talking, that one other very, very popular president had his training in movies.
Yeah.
And that, of course, was Ronald Reagan. And his whole goal in his life, in his personality, was to be friendly and likable. And he achieved that and became a good politician at this. And fortunately had leanings, and at least polite toward constitutionalists and libertarians.
Yeah.
So, but now we have a president that was trained in the modern age of TV, and I have to admit, I never saw one of his shows, but his training must have taught him a lot, because he certainly knows how to appeal to the average person.
Yeah.
So I think there's a little contrast there, or a similarity between Reagan, where they got their training.
Yeah.
But I think the caucus last night is a reflection of total incompetence by the Democrats, and of course that's what the impeachment is all about, incompetence. So it isn't just Schiff and Nadler; it's pervasive, because in a way I think. I think so much is bankrupt in Washington on both sides, but especially the Democrats. They are bankrupt intellectually, and it has to be a personified. Do they ever go after Trump because he says one thing about bringing troops home and then he sends them anyway?
Yeah.
They don't care about that. Do they care? There must be one fiscal conservative in the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, but no. The spending keeps going on and on, so it's this way is happening, and the Democrats have nothing else to do. Yeah. And they thought in this last couple of years, matter of fact, they sensed what was coming, so they started impeaching Trump before it was legal, before he was even president.
Before he was president.
But that is a reflection of the dissent that occurs when government has too much power, and the contest isn't over over going to war. It's just who gets to direct the troops and who directs the money and where's the money being spent, and that's what it is. And when it overwhelms you, at least Trump has the brains to say the right things for people that know that you should have less taxes and less regulations, and you should bring the troops home, but this sort of thing. So I think what's happening there with the Democrats is a reflection of a sickness in this country, and I look at it as a form of moral and political and intellectual bankruptcy, and we're going to see more in this. I'm afraid this type of attitude, because the Republicans are going to have to answer back, and socially, the grassroots are going to be awful, awful angry. If Trump has a setback and something happens, or there's a fraudulent election or something, there's going to be really a lot of anger, and the Democrats, I think, at the moment, you'd have to say they're looking for a fight, and they don't care about anything other than how do we destroy this man and what he stands for.
Yeah, and without any other options. Well, we're stepping back a little bit. We're now 12, 13 hours at least after we should have known the results, and we don't. Yeah, right. And I did a lot of election monitoring, and whenever that happened, we always knew something fishy was up, something was going on. But apparently, an app. A mobile phone app that was supposed to make everything super high-tech didn't function properly, and that's why the reporting was wrong, and that's why everything is gone. We have a couple of tweets just to kind of go back over what happened a little bit, if we can put up the first one if we have it handy. Here is the chairman of the Democratic Party, just a couple days before the Iowa caucus. For 3 years, we've been preparing for the process that officially kicks off tonight in Iowa, the Democratic presidential primary. Today, our chair, Tom Perez, reflects on the reforms we've made to make this the most transparent primary in our history. Better get rid of that one. Let's go on to the next one. And this is someone commenting. This is very fascinating. Not great optics here, folks. The Dems paid a company literally called Shadow to create the caucus app. Buttigieg campaign also paid Shadow, FEC records show. Caucus app fails. Buttigieg declares himself Iowa winner with no results. That smells pretty fishy. And then we have a final one here. This is from Moon of Alabama. And they're actually pointing to a great piece that Max Blumenthal did this morning about who's behind this app. Seth Klarman, at the time of publication, 12 hours after voting in the Democratic Party's Iowa caucuses ended. Results have not been announced. The delay is the result of a failed app developed by a company appropriately named Shadow Inc. This firm was staffed by Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama campaign veterans and created by a Democratic dark money nonprofit backed by hedge fund billionaires, including Seth Klarman. This is really fascinating, and this may, because Bernie was surging this past week, and some of his internal polling suggested that he was a real clear winner, and then all of a sudden, all of these Hillary people come in, and there's all kinds of problems. So it does make you wonder a little bit.
It sounds like the more things change, the more they stay the same, and especially in politics. One of the questions that libertarians entertain quite frequently is, why vote? Voting has no meaning to it whatsoever. And sometimes when you look at that crowd there, let's say for some reason the Democrats destined to win this presidential race, and you look at those individuals who are running, it's almost like, who's the smartest? And Buttigieg, they say he's pretty smart, and evidently he's an insider too.
Yeah.
So it's really a corrupt system. And then people will ask me, well, if voting seems to be so worthless, why did I get involved? Mm-hmm. And of course, I got involved with the idea that I don't think I could shake it loose and get enough people to even start thinking about limited government. But no, I think if a person goes into politics and they do get involved in voting, that it should be a reflection of a vision, of a philosophy. And so that to me is worthwhile. But there are a lot of shortcomings on the voting and a lot of corruption. I was early in my career, I lost an election, 200,000 to 300,000 votes by 8 votes, and of course we could never settle it. But voting, if it's honest and you have an individual has a message, it's not. The other thing is use of violence or intellectual contest, to spread a message and get people to understand and put pressure on the politicians, because a lot of them are there, don't have much of a belief. They're there just to stay there and have a job and have the prestige of it. So if they sit back and they allow us to go to war in Vietnam and never fight it, when it becomes popular and insane that we're there, and the people finally speak out, the Congress, usually reflects it. So the philosophy of a country is very important. But the voting, I would think if you look at that crowd, it's not much of a choice with those Democrats. Why vote for one of them? Because they all seem the same. Some a little bit more crooked than the other. But philosophically, who's the most violent directed person to redistribute wealth? The socialist viewpoint, and that's a real contest there. So it's that type of voting. Ultimately, that primary last night is not going, no matter what happens, even if one wins, it's not going to change the direction of the country. It's just going to make it much worse. But I also think that they were so inept and incompetent, I would think that Trump probably is feeling pretty good today.
Well, yeah, if you look at the foreign policy, we ran a piece on RPI about Warren's extremely hawkish foreign policy team, very pro-war. We know Buttigieg is very, very pro-war, very hawkish. So you're right. What's the point of voting, really? There are no, except for Tulsi and to a degree Bernie Sanders, there are none of them that want to change our foreign policy at all. But so we're thinking about what could have happened. First of all, it could be a conspiracy to thwart Bernie Sanders. They did it in 2016. They may have done it again, and I've outlined it pretty well. The CEO of the company that developed the app, he worked for Hillary Clinton. The company was also paid by Buttigieg's campaign. It reminds me of CrowdStrike, remember? They're the ones who discovered that the Russians hacked the 2016 election. It turns out they were paid by Hillary Clinton. So that's one option. The second one I think you're leaning toward, and it's a pretty good guess, is total incompetence. Keep it simple, stupid. You don't need all these apps, and you have maybe older folks who aren't that handy with apps. That's the second possibility. And the third one that I would throw out, and maybe it's a combination of all three, Dr. Paul, but I think it's also believing your own propaganda. For 3 years, the Democrats have been convinced that Putin is stealing our elections and that Trump is paymaster, and they're working together to subvert our democracy. And here's something from the Des Moines Register. Here's one of the problems. They never tested this app. They never did a dry run. And the reason was because they were terrified of the Russians. The Russians were going to hack it. Here's what Des Moines Register said. At the reports of Russian hacking attempts of the 2016 primaries, party leaders are taking unprecedented precautions to protect against cybersecurity breaches. So they never tested the stuff because they were sure that Putin was going to come in there and, I don't know, do what. But so maybe it's a combination of the three.
Well,
I
think both sides, Republicans and Democrats, are all interventionists and authoritarians, and in some way, to some degree, they believe in lying and cheating and stealing. You know, Republicans do that too, and killing, whether it's war or elsewhere. But this whole thing on Trump is fascinating because it's over and above that, because the hatred came early, and I think it was because Trump was able to challenge the status quo and actually appeal to those of us and others who didn't like the deep state.
Yeah.
And the questions remain on that. So there was and I think it was Trump's success overcoming that and getting elected, and then accomplishing, at least according to his speeches, a miraculous, recovery and all this thing. And I think it started with jealousy, because it's a contest over winning and conniving and cheating and all this. And here, Trump comes out ahead. I think I'm very jealous of him. But then what I think happens is, who put him there? And it had to have been the voters, and had to cheat in the votes there. So we hate the people, starting with Hillary. Yeah. We hate those people that voted for him. And so I don't think it started with all of a sudden, if they wanted to hate Trump, they should have hated him when he was on TV or something. but no, the people directed the hate toward the people who voted him, and of course that went over. I think the hate toward Trump came secondarily, but I think they're jealous as all hate. Yeah. Because he's being measured by their terms. Yeah. I mean, what can you imagine what the Democrats would be saying if they had as many successes as Trump has had?
Exactly, but they still refuse to learn the lesson from that and put someone that's, that can take him on. I think about someone like Tulsi Gabbard. Can you imagine the two of them in a debate?
Boy.
It would be tough because she would say the things. Hey, you said you were going to do this and you didn't do it. You're going to bring the troops home, you didn't do it. What are you lobbing bombs over in Syria for? She would have really had him on his back feet, but they don't want any of that. They'll do anything to stop that. But I guess our time is getting close, so I would just close by saying, by what rights is the U.S. the world arbiter of democracy and voting? We can't even. And this is not by any stretch of the imagination the first time something like this, a fiasco like this, has happened. Over and over and over. Our voting system is dirty. It's terrible. Yet, we'll go to Venezuela and tell them that, they got it wrong. We didn't have anyone on the ground, but you guys got it wrong. We'll go to Bolivia, you guys got it wrong. Egypt, you guys got it wrong. Ukraine, you guys got it wrong. Your voting's terrible. So I think the world is going to wake up and see, and they're going to laugh at us because we think we can go around telling everyone else how to put on elections when we can't do a decent job ourselves. So there's a big problem. Just before we went on, I was reading Colonel Pat Lang's on his site, Sic Semper Tyrannis, and he had a good piece about how the Democratic Party really is imploding, and it reminds him of the Whig Party in the U.S. in the 1850s. So this may be the ultimate outcome of the fiasco we've seen tonight. We'll wait and see, Dr. Paul.
Right. And for us, it's an overplay on the word democracy. Democracy is what we have to have and what we want to spread. And that's why we have a foreign policy to spread American democracy, freedom, and liberty. And at the same time, now that it looks like democracy in this country is failing, people will look at this last night, democracy is failing. But they're so rare that do we hear the individual who says, we don't have a democracy. It wasn't in the Constitution. Democracy is dangerous. It's the dictatorship of the minority. If you care about minorities, you don't want democracy. That is not a discussion. But right now, we fight wars to spread democracy, and now we're fearful, and you'll see it in the papers all the time. We're not going to be a democratic system anymore, so and so. So, but it's easy to sort it out because there are some good aspects of what people visualize with democracy, at least if you had fair elections. That's why you have to minimize that. And the only way you can minimize the importance of elections is to minimize the power of the government. government. I sort of like the executive branch of Switzerland to be more of a model than the model that we have for a strong executive, a world empire, and telling other people what to do and bankrupting our country. So I think the others, the other goals set up by our founders in the Constitution, that of emphasizing personal liberty and limited government and local government, is a much better setup than what we have today. I do want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.